These are notes about methods and a new concept called return values. Up until now, all the methods we've looked at, whether they're the methods that are built into processing, like setup and draw, or the methods we have made ourselves, start with that word void, which means although we can call them to happen at a specific time or a certain number of times, that once they're over, they're not passing on any information. They just run and then they're done. There are other kinds of methods that once they are finished, the technical term is return or pass on some data that it may have computed during the course of running. So those start with words other than void and include that word in them return, which means to pass on that value. So you can use it in other places. There's a bunch of reasons that this is practical in regular computing. For example, think of an antivirus system that would scan your computer. And basically, when it's finished running, you need to know whether during the course of that run it found a virus or not. So if it doesn't, it would return false, no virus is found. And if it did, it would return true, virus found. And then you would prompt you on the next action. So there's a whole bunch of times that parts of code need to happen and then give some solution. A calculator is a perfect example, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. If you have a handheld calculator and you punch in two numbers separated by the AND button, that it's going to return to you, pass on, the results of that computation. So you can change the input in order to get different output. So let's look at why we'd need them and why it's better to use a return value than just a regular method without a return value. So if I were to make the function add together, that's going to take in eventually two values. I'm going to say I want parameters int a and int b. So when I call that function add together, it's going to you're going to have to pass in an a parameter and a b parameter. And then let's say for now I can try it with, I'm going to make a local variable in here, sum, int sum, and I'm going to say sum equals a plus b. So then I'm like, all right. And then maybe text that sum at 100, 100. So it's going to show what that sum is at 100, 100. So if I use that function add together, I'm going to need to add in two values, 2 and 4. So if I run my program, I'm going to get 6. Beautiful. But if I wanted to add together more than one number, or more than one pair of numbers rather, 5 and 7, it's going to display them on top of one another because it's putting them at the same place. All right, so maybe I want to be able to text it out here, so I know. So instead of having this local variable int sum, I'm going to make it a global variable int sum, and then every time it calls add together, it's going to add a and b, and then instead of texting it out here, I guess I could text out sum here because now it's global, so I can refer to sum. So I put one at 100, 100, and wait a second, can I do that? I can, but does this draw your eye to what the problem is going to be here? If it adds together 2 and 4 and assigns that value to sum, then adds together 5 and 7, then assigns that value to sum, that sum global variable will be changed a second time. So really all we're going to see is the second sum in two different places because, as we discussed, global variables, no matter where they are, have that same value. So once I changed it the second time, called add together on 5 and 7, then that value is just going to be that second value of add together, no matter where I use sum. So that's not going to work either. So this is why it would be handy to have a return value. So I'm going to put int sum in here again as a local variable. I'm going to say int sum equals a plus b. And what I want to do is have this program return that value sum. So once it's finished, it's going to produce that value sum. Right now, it's telling me void methods cannot return a value. The word we want to have instead of void is whatever the data type of the return is. So if sum, what we're returning is an int. I want to say int add together A and B. Now if I run it, I've added these two things together. I have not asked it to text out any of this, so even the quickest thing to do would just be to put this as the first value, the first parameter of my text. So I can say 100, 100, and then put this second one, text at 100, 200. Because now this function add together, for all intents and purposes, this is just an integer value now. I could use this anywhere I could use an integer value. The whole function, whatever it returns, add together with those parameters is now sum. If I wanted to, I could assign it to another variable and text out that one. If I wanted to, then I could even use it as like, oh, I don't know, I could say an ellipse, add together. I don't know why you'd ever do this, but so if I wanted an ellipse that was 100, whatever the value of 100 plus 50 is, and then, sorry, I need a capital T, add together 40 and 70 by, make it 50 by 50. It will just use those as the x and y value. That seems a little not the greatest purpose of it, but basically now you could have a calculator that no matter where you use this will always use return the sum of A and B. So that's part one. There'll be a part two also.